Hello, welcome to Uplifting Stories. Today's story is called My First Theft. Many years ago, when I was a boy of 7 or 8 years old, my home was near a beautiful village in the central part of the state of New York. Although it was but a humble cottage, the flowers and shrubs flourished so much under the care of my mother, it made it seem like a paradise to my young eyes. And even now, as I look back and remember the home of my boyhood, I can look back at it as the sweetest spot on earth. My father lived in humble circumstances, and by close and laborious study he earned the daily bread of his family, ever looking forward to the time when the reward of his labor should bring us peace and plenty. I was an only son, and was acknowledged by all to be a growing image of my father. And although almost spoiled by him, his poverty prevented the gratification of very many of my childish wants, and saved me from a fate of far too many spoiled children. He was a true Christian, always endeavoring to instill good and holy principles into the minds of my little sister and myself. The distance between my father's house and the village was about half a mile, and most delightful walk it was in the summer. To take the hand of my father and accompany him to his visits to the village store, listening to his stories, and carry some little gift from my sister and mother, was just one of my greatest pleasures. There was one thing, however, which I longed for more than anything else, and which I imagined would make me supremely happy. It was a jackknife. Then I would not be obliged to borrow my father's every time I wished to cut a string or a stick, but then I could whittle whenever I chose and as much as I wanted. Dreams of kites and bows and arrows, boats, etc., all manufactured with the aid of that shining blade. They haunted me by day and night. I had asked my father to buy me one, but he could only promise to grant my request at some future time, which to me seemed like ages. One of these visits, the sequel to which forms the subject of this tale, I shall never forget. It was a beautiful morning in June that my father called me, and he gave me leave, if I wished, to go with him to the store. I was delighted and took his hand as we started. The birds sang sweetly on every bush, and everything looked so bright and beautiful that my heart fairly leaped with joy. I was very happy, and after our arrival at the village, and while my father was occupied in purchasing some articles in a remote part of the store, my attention was drawn to a man who was asking the price of various jackknives which lay on the counter. And this was a very interesting subject to me, so I approached, intending only to look at them. I picked one up. I opened it. I examined it. I tried the springs. I felt the edge of the blade with my thumb, and thought I could never cease admiring their polished surface. If it were just mine, I thought, oh, how happy I would be if I could just have one. Just at this moment, I happened to look up, and I saw that the merchant had gone to change a bill for his customer, and no one was observing me. For fear that I might be tempted to do wrong, I started to put the knife back on the counter. But then an evil spirit whispered to me, "Put it in your pocket, quick!" And without stopping to think of the crime or its consequences, I hurriedly slipped that knife into my pocket, and as I did, I felt a blush of shame burning to my cheeks. But the store was rather dark, and no one noticed it, nor did the merchant miss the knife. We then soon started for home, my father giving me a parcel to carry. As we walked along, my thoughts continually rested on that knife, and I kept my hand in my pocket all the time, from a sort of guilty fear that it would be seen, so I had to make sure I kept it down. This, together with the carrying of the bundle in my other hand, made it very difficult for me to keep pace with my father, and he noticed it. He gave me a lecture about walking with my hands in my pockets. How difficult were my thoughts then from what they were when passing the same scenes a few hours before. The song of the birds seemed joyous no longer, but it seemed sad and sorrowful, as if chiding me for my wicked act. I could not look my father in the face, for I had been heedless of his precepts, and I broke one of God's commandments, and I became a thief. As these thoughts passed through my mind, I could hardly help crying. But I concealed my feelings, and I tried to think of the good times I would have with that knife. I could hardly say anything on my way home, and my father, thinking I was either tired or sick, kindly took my burden and spoke smoothly to me, his guilty son. No sooner did we reach my home than I retreated to a safe place behind the house to try out that stolen knife. I had picked up a stick and I was whittling it, perfectly delighted with the sharp blade which glided right through the wood almost by itself, when suddenly I heard the deep, subdued voice of my father calling me by name, and on looking up I saw him at the window directly over my head, gazing down very sorrowfully at me. The stick dropped from my hand, and with the knife clasped in the other, I proceeded into the house. I saw by his looks that he had divined it all. I had found him sitting in his armchair, looking very sorrowful. I walked directly to his side, and in a low, calm voice, he asked me where I had gotten the knife. His gentle manner and kind tone went straight to my heart, and I burst into tears. As soon as my voice would allow, I made a full confession. He didn't whip me, as some fathers would have done, but he reprimanded me in such a manner that while I felt truly repentant for the deed I had done, I loved him more than ever, and I promised never, ever to do anything like that again. Then in my father's company, I returned with him to the store, and on my knees I begged the merchant's pardon, and I promised never again to take what was not my own. My father is now long since dead, and never do I think of my first theft without blessing the memory of him whose kind teachings and gentle corrections have made it thus far in my life and forever my last theft. After my father spent some time talking to me and explaining the possible consequences of my action, I understood the seriousness of it then, and I resolved that I would never again take anything that did not belong to me. We all have that temptation now and then to try to take something that doesn't belong to us. We want something so bad, we feel it would bring so much pleasure if we could just have that one thing. But when we don't earn it, or we can't get it honestly, it drives so many feelings into us of guilt, of sorrow, of pain, that it's not worth it in the long time. And not only that, it will start building bad habits in us, because you can't just stop at one thing. It's just like a lie. It worked the one time, next time it'll work. Maybe the next time after that. And we constantly want to try to keep doing these things. We need to remember they're not good for us. There's a reason God says, "Thou shalt not steal." It's not because he's a bully. It's not because he's a dictator. It's because he loves us and he knows what it does to us. And he wants to see us also share that love with others. And we can't truly show someone love if we're stealing from them. I thank you, and I hope you had a wonderful day when you listened to this story. Bye.